The snow was falling sideways. It was that bitter kind of Boston cold. The kind that doesn't just touch your skin, it finds your bones, and it hates them. Lucas held his cup out. His fingers were wrapped in duct tape and old wool. They were numb. They had been numb since November. He didn't look up at the faces passing by. He learned a long time ago that looking up was a mistake. If you look them in the eye, they have to see you. And nobody wants to see a ghost, especially not on Newbury Street. Not with their shopping bags full of things they didn't need. Spare change, Lucas whispered. The words were just a habit, a rhythm like breathing, spare change, spare change. A pair of polished black Oxfords stopped in front of him, Italian leather, hand-stitched. Lucas' new shoes in another life. He had been a man who polished his boots until they looked like black glass. He kept his head down, sir. Anything helps, Lucas mumbled. The man didn't move. He didn't drop a quarter. He didn't keep walking. He just stood there, like a statue in the snow. Lucas felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. The hairs on his arms stood up. It wasn't the cold. It was the feeling of being hunted. He slowly lifted his head. The man was tall, wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than a car, a silk scarf, leather gloves, but his face. He wasn't looking at Lucas with pity. He wasn't looking at him with disgust. He was crying. Tears were streaming down his clean-shaven cheeks, freezing in the wind. He stared at Lucas like he was seeing a dead man walking. Lucas tried to pull his hand back. He wanted to hide the cup. He wanted to run. But the man dropped to his knees, right there in the slush, in the mud, in the $5,000 suit. He ignored the gasps of the shoppers walking by. He reached out with a gloved hand, and he grabbed Lucas's filthy, taped-up fingers. "You don't remember me," the man whispered. His voice was shaking. "But I've been looking for you for 30 years. Lucas pulled his hand away. He scrambled backward against the brick wall. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't know you," Lucas stammered. "I don't know anybody. Leave me alone." The man reached into his coat pocket. Lucas flinched. He thought it was a gun or a knife. On the street, it's usually a weapon, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a small, battered metal object. The man placed it gently into Lucas's empty coffee cup. It made a heavy clunk. It wasn't a coin. Lucas looked down, staring back at him. Resting on the dirty cardboard bottom of the cup was a dog tag. It was dented, scratched, burnt at the edges, but the name stamped into the metal was still readable. Lucas A. Miller, Uzmk. Lucas stopped breathing. He hadn't seen that tag since the fire in Fallujah. He hadn't seen that tag since the night he died inside. He looked up at the crying millionaire. "Who are you?" Lucas whispered. The man didn't answer. He just stood up, brushed the snow off his knees, and walked away into the crowd, leaving Lucas alone, with his name in a cup, and a question that was about to tear his world apart. Lucas stared at the dog tag for an hour. The snow piled up on his shoulders. He didn't feel it. He rubbed his thumb over the raised letters. Miller, that used to be him. Sergeant Miller, the man who led the squad, the man who promised mothers he would bring their sons home. He had broken that promise. He shoved the tag into his deepest pocket, under the 3 layers of flannel, next to his skin. He needed to move. If you stop moving in this weather, you don't wake up. He gathered his things, a plastic tarp, a sleeping bag with a broken zipper, a backpack held together by bungee cords. He walked toward the alley behind the bakery. The vents there blew hot air until 10 o'clock. It was the only reason he still had toes, but his mind wasn't on the cold. It was on the man in the camel hair coat. He knew that face, or he knew the eyes, blue, piercing, almost gray. He had seen those eyes before, screaming, wide with terror, reflected in the light of a burning Humvee. Lucas stopped in the middle of the alley. He leaned against a dumpster. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. No, it wasn't possible. Everyone in that Humvee died. Lucas had checked. He had pulled the bodies out himself. He had burned his hands down to the meat trying to get the doors open. He remembered the screams stopping. That was the worst part, when the screaming stopped. The silence was louder than the explosion. Lucas slid down the wall. He put his hands over his ears. "Get out of my head," he growled. A rat skittered past his boot. He didn't flinch. He was used to rats. Rats were honest. They just wanted your crumbs. Memories were the real vermin. They wanted your soul. He closed his eyes, and he saw it again, the ambush, the RPG hitting the lead vehicle, the chaos. He had been the one to call it in. He had been the one to choose the route. Shadow Ridge. It was supposed to be clear. It was supposed to be safe. It was a kill box, 6 men, gone, because Sergeant Miller turned left instead of right. Lucas hit the side of the dumpster with his fist. Pain shot up his arm. Good. Pain was real. Pain grounded him. He heard footsteps at the end of the alley, heavy boots crunching on ice. Lucas opened his eyes. He reached for the half-brick he kept in his pocket. It was 2 cops, beat officers. He knew them. Officer Miller, no relation, and Officer Kowalski. They weren't the bad kind. They usually let him sleep if he stayed out of sight, but tonight, they looked serious. Lucas, Officer Kowalski said. He shone his flashlight in Lucas's face. Lucas squinted. I'm moving, he said, just catching my breath. We're not here to move you, the cop said. He lowered the light. Someone was asking about you. A guy in a suit showed up at the precinct. Showed us a picture of you from 30 years ago. Lucas gripped the brick tighter. What did you tell him? We told him where you usually camp, Miller said. Look, this guy, he's heavy hitter, senator-level money. He said it was a matter of life and death. Lucas stood up. His knees popped. Did he say what he wanted? Kowalski looked at his partner, then back at Lucas. He said he wanted to return something he stole. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. Stole? Lucas didn't have anything worth stealing, not anymore, except the truth. He pushed past the cops. Hey, Miller shouted. Where are you going? Lucas didn't answer. He ran, or as close to running as he could manage with a bad hip and 40 pounds of wet gear. He had to get away. He had to disappear. If that man knew about Shadow Ridge, if he knew whose fault it really was. Lucas wasn't running from the man. He was running from the judgment. He made it to the park. The common, it was empty, just statues and snow. He found a bench under a bridge. He threw his tarp over it. He crawled inside. He pulled the dog tag out. He stared at it in the darkness. Stole. The cop said he stole something. Lucas turned the tag over. His fingers traced the back. There was something scratched there. Something that hadn't been there 30 years ago. He held it up to the faint street lamp glow filtering through the tarp. It was an address. And a time. 1400 Beacon Street, midnight. Lucas looked at his watch. A cracked Timex he found in a trash can 3 years ago. It was 11:15. He had 45 minutes. He could run. He could take the next bus to Providence. Start over. Be a new ghost in a new city, or he could go find out why a ghost from his past was wearing a $5,000 suit. Lucas clenched his jaw. He put the tag around his neck. The cold metal burned against his chest. He crawled out from under the tarp. He didn't run this time. He walked, straight toward the address, straight toward the past. 1400 Beacon Street wasn't a house. It was a church. An old stone cathedral with stained glass windows that looked like black eyes in the night. The doors were heavy oak, iron handles. Lucas stood at the bottom of the steps. He felt small, dirty. He hadn't been inside a church since the funeral. Since he had to look 6 widows in the eye and hand them folded flags, he almost turned around. His body wanted to turn around. Every instinct he had left was screaming at him to flee. But then, the door opened. A sliver of warm, golden light spilled out onto the snow. It cut through the darkness like a knife. And there he was, the man in the camel coat, standing in the doorway, waiting. He didn't wave. He just stepped back, inviting Lucas in. Lucas climbed the stairs, 1, 2, 3. Each step felt like lifting 100 pounds. He crossed the threshold. The warmth hit him first. The smell of beeswax and old wood. The silence, not the empty silence of the alley, but a heavy, expectant silence. The church was empty, just the 2 of them. The man was standing by the altar. He had taken off his coat. Underneath, he was wearing a black suit, but he had loosened his tie. He looked younger now, without the coat. Lucas could see the set of his shoulders, the way he stood. It was a military stance, at ease, but ready. Lucas walked down the center aisle. His wet boots squeaked on the stone floor. He left a trail of muddy water behind him. He felt ashamed of the mess. He stopped 10 feet away. "Who are you?" Lucas asked again. His voice echoed in the vast space. The man reached into his jacket. He pulled out a photo. He held it up. It was a picture of a platoon, young men, smiling. sunburns and desert camo. Lucas knew the photo. He was in the center, 22 years old, invincible. The man pointed to a soldier on the far right, a kid, barely 18, freckles, nervous smile, Private Sterling, Lucas whispered. He felt the name hit him like a physical blow. Private Arthur Sterling, the radio operator, the one who screamed the loudest when the fire started. That was my father, the man said. Lucas felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the back of a pew to stay upright. Your father, Lucas breathed. He didn't make it. None of them made it, I know, the man said. His voice was hard now, controlled. I was 3 years old when he deployed. I don't remember him, all I have are letters. The man walked closer. He stopped right in front of Lucas. He smelled like expensive soap and grief, and in every letter he wrote about you, Sergeant Miller, the man who taught him how to keep his head down, the man who shared his water ration when the supply truck broke down, the man he trusted with his life. Lucas shook his head. Tears burned his eyes, hot and fast. He trusted the wrong man, Lucas choked out. I killed him. I led them into that valley. It was my call. I killed your father. Lucas waited for the punch. He waited for the man to scream, to spit on him, to tell him what he had been telling himself for 30 years, that he was a murderer, that he deserved to freeze in an alley, but the man didn't strike him. He reached into his pocket again, and he pulled out a letter. The paper was yellow, fragile, creased 1,000 times. My father wrote this, the man said, 2 days before the ambush. It was in his locker back at base. It was mailed to my mother after the funeral. He held it out. Read it, the man commanded. Lucas wiped his hands on his coat, trying to get the grime off. He took the letter. His hands shook so hard he could barely focus on the handwriting. Dear Mary, I know you're worried. I'm scared too, but we have Sergeant Miller. Today. A grenade rolled into the mess tent. A defect. Pin popped. Everyone froze, but not Miller. He dove on it. He put his helmet over it and laid his body on top. It turned out to be a dud, but he didn't know that. He was ready to die for us, Mary, for me. As long as I'm with him, I know I'm safe. He's the best man I've ever known. Lucas lowered the letter. He couldn't breathe. He remembered the grenade. He had forgotten about it. He had forgotten so many things. The man, Sterling's son, stepped closer. You didn't kill him, Sergeant. War killed him. The enemy killed him. Sterling's son looked Lucas in the eye. But you kept him alive long enough to write this. You gave him hope, and because of who you were, he died believing he was with the best man on earth. Lucas dropped the letter. He covered his face with his dirty hands, and he broke. A sound came out of him that wasn't human. It was a howl. 30 years of guilt. 30 years of carrying 6 ghosts on his back. He fell to the floor, weeping. Snot and tears mixing with the dirt on his face. He expected to hit the cold stone, but he didn't. Arms caught him, strong arms. The millionaire was holding him, hugging him, pressing Lucas's dirty face against his clean white shirt. It's okay, the man whispered. It's okay, Lucas. You're home. Stand down, Marine. Stand down. They sat on the church steps for a long time. The storm had passed. The city was quiet. Lucas drank coffee from a thermos the man had brought. It was the best coffee he had ever tasted, black, strong. The man, his name was James, sat next to him. His coat was ruined, stained with mud and tears. He didn't seem to care. I didn't steal your dog tags, James said quietly. Lucas looked at the tag around his neck. I know, he said. I threw them away in the hospital. I didn't want to be Miller anymore. James nodded. I found them at a pawn shop. 5 years ago. I've been looking for you ever since. I hired private investigators. Nothing. You're good at hiding. Lucas shrugged. It's easy to hide when nobody is looking for you. James looked out at the street. My father. He saved money. Before he left, he wanted to open a garage. He loved cars. James smiled, a sad, small smile. He put that money in a trust for me, and he put a clause in it if he didn't make it back. Half of it was for me, and the other half was for the men who served with him. Lucas shook his head. I don't want money, James. I can't take his money. James held up a hand. It's not money, Lucas, not really. James stood up. He reached into his pocket one last time. He pulled out a set of keys. I used the money, James said. I bought a building, an old warehouse on the south side. We renovated it, 20 rooms, warm beds, a kitchen, counselors. James tossed the keys to Lucas. Lucas caught them. They felt heavy. Real, it's a shelter, James said, for veterans, for guys like you. guys who think they aren't worth saving. James looked at Lucas, but it needs a manager. It needs someone who knows what it's like in the dark, someone who can lead them out. Lucas looked at the keys, then he looked at the street, at the cold sidewalk where he had slept for 3 years. "I'm a mess, James," Lucas whispered. "I'm a drunk. I'm broken." James shook his head. "You're a sergeant, and your squad is waiting for you." James stood straight. He snapped his heels together, and right there, on Beacon Street, at 2 in the morning, the millionaire saluted the homeless man, slow, respectful, perfect form. Lucas stood up. His back cracked, his hip hurt, but he straightened his spine. He brushed the crumbs off his jacket. He looked at James. Then he looked at the keys. He took a deep breath. The air was cold, but for the first time in a long time, it felt fresh. Lucas slowly raised his hand, and he returned the salute. "I'm ready," Lucas said. James smiled. "Then let's go. I've got the car running." Lucas walked down the steps. He left his tarp. He left his cup. He left the ghost of Shadow Ridge sitting on the bench. He got into the passenger seat of the black sedan. The heater was on. It felt like heaven as they drove away. Lucas looked in the side mirror. He saw the empty street. He saw the snow covering his old footprints. He wasn't that man anymore. He wasn't the ghost. He was Sergeant Miller, and he had a new mission. Sometimes spare change isn't a quarter. Sometimes it's a chance. A chance to change the ending of the story. And sometimes the person who saves you is the one you thought you failed the most. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs hope, because we all need a little spare change sometimes. See you in the next one.